Hi, welcome back. This is Jeffrey Lessel, also known as Geo, and I'm continuing my look at these e-ink devices, and today I'm going to be going over my somewhat review of the Supernote Nomad, the A6X2. Now you can see here, just kind of like how I've done with the Boox devices, I've gone ahead and taken notes as I've been using the device to go over at some point, that point being today, my thoughts as I've been using it. Now I've had this opened and being used for about a week and a half now. So I've got, I'm certainly not an expert in it, but I do have enough experience with it that I feel like I can discuss it a little bit. So essentially, we're going to kind of go down the list here of my notes, and I'll discuss these things one by one. Some of them have some overlap, which we'll cover as we get to them. So let's just get started. The first thing on my list is a very limited app store. Now that is very true. Unlike the Boox devices, the Note Air 3 and the 3C, this is more of a closed ecosystem. So on the Boox devices, you have the Google App Store, or the Play Store, and on this one you do not. You only have what Supernote, or what Ratta has approved and what is put on this App Store. So the only way you can get there is through settings, and you go to apps, and then you have this Supernote App Store. So in there, these are all the apps that are currently available for the Supernote. You have the Kindle, which for me was a no compromise. Whatever I got had to have the ability to have Kindle apps or Kindle on it, so I can read those books, even library books, through that. The other app they have available right now is this Atelier. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Looks French. I don't know if it is. But it's basically a drawing app, and I've barely played with that. You can see here I've got an upgrade on that. I'm not an artist, so I don't anticipate using that a whole lot. Although the idea of becoming good at drawing is intriguing, but knowing me, it's not going to happen. So very limited app store. What I would like beyond Kindle is the Readwise Reader app, and I do know from a thread on Twitter that I saw recently that that is a potential that could be coming at some point soon to the Supernote. I really hope it does. And I have tried this kind of weird workaround that seemed to work. So in a note, you can create a link to a web page. Now, there's no way to get to a browser on here unless you follow a link to the web page. So you can't just open up a browser and go to a web page. So one of the workarounds I decided to try was create a link just to Readwise and link that to the Readwise Reader website. And I was able to log in and look at articles using that method. But as you can imagine, it wasn't a great experience because the browser version of the Readwise Reader and whatever browser this is using weren't really playing super well together. So it was doable, but I wouldn't call it enjoyable. I would like it to be enjoyable. I would call it pretty much enjoyable on the Boox devices for the Readwise Reader app. The other thing is this device does not have a speaker, while the Boox ones do. And in the Readwise Reader app, it has the ability to do kind of a text to voice translation. So it'll read it to you essentially. And there's a method of reading that's supposed to, help with retention or understanding, where you listen to the words and you also read along with it at the same time. And so I've tried that on the Boox app. That was pretty enjoyable. Worked really well. But you just wouldn't be able to do that with the Nomad. Even once the Readwise Reader does come to the App Store, if it does, then you wouldn't really be able to do that. Unless it has some sort of ability to connect a Bluetooth headphones or AirPods or something like that to the device. I actually just now considered that. That could be a possibility. I don't even know if they have audio decoding code in here or not. So I don't know if that would be a thing. So maybe that's something I could try. So yeah, very limited app store, but right now I don't know if that's a deal killer for me. While some of these other things, could be a deal killer or a deal sealer for or against the Nomad. Okay. The next thing is the app or the front light. There is no front light on the Supernote. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's not okay. There hasn't been many times where I've used this where I've really wished it had a front light. There's been times where it'd be nice if it had a front light. Maybe I could read this a little bit easier. But there's never been a time where I was like, this is unusable because it has no front light. The other thing is on the screen, which is down here. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but it's a similar idea. But the screen is kind of reflective. So as I move this around, you might be able to see some of that reflection on the lights around me. And where I read typically is I have a chair, and in that chair there's a lamp like right above me that's going down like this. And so when I have this on my lap or in my hands and I'm reading it, sometimes that lamp is just right above the reading surface, reflecting, straight down into my eyes, and it's a little too reflective. I think any device is going to be like that, unfortunately. But this one has, I think there's like the cover over this, or the film, or whatever you call it, that's over this screen may make that a little bit worse because it disperses it a little bit more. But I don't know. It could be, I don't know that for sure. But that is something I wrote down because it's something I noticed, and it did bother me at the moment. All right. The third thing I have on here is the screen can sometimes be too grabby, but that seems to be reducing with usage. So if you remember in my unboxing video, when I first started trying to write on this device, it felt like I was writing on like an old cover of a vinyl binder. Like it was squeaky, it was kind of grabby. I will say that this was a very early note that I wrote down in these notes, and over time, as I mentioned later on in this list, over time that has greatly reduced. So I can still feel it a little bit, like down here in the corners where I rarely write. But everywhere else, like the main screen, it feels really good now. Not that it felt horrible at the beginning, it just felt a little odd, not like what I was expecting. But now it feels really, I guess, fun to write on. It's a good experience to write on it. Maybe even great. So that's less of a concern now. Now, if you get this device and open it up and try writing on, you're like, what the heck? This feels horrible. Don't try to peel off the screen protector or anything like that. Like, it's supposed to, maybe not supposed to feel like that, but it does feel like that for the first bit. And I don't know if it's scratching on it with a pen tip or if it's, getting your oils on it or whatever it is, it does wear off over time. And to the point now where it's very enjoyable to write on. So keep going at it and it'll be good. It says, I wish I could use Readwise and the Logos on here, but I don't know yet if that is a deal breaker. Again, that's what I mentioned about the limited app store, limited app options. I like the smaller form factor. I didn't know which of these devices I would like better in terms of form factor. So we have the Supernote on top and the Air 3C on bottom. And so far, I think I've liked the portability and usability of the smaller form factor of the Supernote. There has been at least one time where I was reading something. I was like, this might be fun to read on the larger screen. And so I did move over to the Boox device, and it was nice, which unfortunately makes this a harder decision. If it sucked, then that would be much easier. I'd be like, well, this isn't the one. But it was nice to have the larger screen real estate. And that could come into play too in a PDF, which I'll show in a minute. But when I'm typically working, I have a split keyboard. So I'll have, one part of the keyboard on this side and one part of the keyboard on the other. And I'll typically have my Supernote kind of in the middle here. So I'll be working, blah, 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 mousing. And then if I need to take a note, it's just right here. I can take the note, put my pen back down, and keep typing. With the Boox, that's a little too big for that middle area between a keyboard. It might work better if I didn't, tilt it like this, because I am right-handed. I like kind of going like this. But yeah, it doesn't work quite as well with the Boox as it does with the Supernote. All right, next one on the list. For some reason, it feels snappier than the Note Air 3, even though it sounds like it is less powerful. I think on paper, the Supernote is less powerful than the Boox Note Air 3 and the 3C. However, as I've been using it, initially it did feel like it was quite a bit snappier. And I don't know if that's because it was like the honeymoon stage when I wrote this note of the Nomad. But I still think there are times where the Supernote feels snappier, and there are times where the Boox devices feel snappier. And there's also, so it's a trade-off. But further down, I'll go ahead and go to this one. It does say that sometimes my presses don't register. And that may be because of something I'm doing. I don't feel like it might be. So if I try to use the pen instead to press the button, then it works. Excuse me. So for example, if I press this with my thumb, sometimes it registers. Excuse me. But sometimes I feel like I have to use the pen to make that work really well. And even now, trying to do it, maybe if it's lifting it up. There we go. If I put it down and I'm looking at it straight on, then it works well. Okay. So sometimes it maybe feels like it's not registering correctly on my presses. Next one, almost 72 hours after opening it. The battery is at 12%. I opened it like at 80 something, I think, maybe 90. And it went from 20%-ish down to 12% during one reading session on the Kindle. That was about an hour long. And that hour, I always have Wi-Fi on. And that hour was spent actively reading. So I was underlining, highlighting, taking notes. So I did think that the 20% to the 12% was kind of a big jump in that 1 hour, because everything else has been so not draining. The battery drains pretty slowly on here compared to the Note 3C especially. The Note 3 is better on its battery. So yeah, and then just like I did with the Note Air 3 and 3C, I did charge it through the USB port on my MacBook just to keep things similar. And I started charging it at 12%, and it took about 2.5 hours to get to 100%. Now, I will say that yesterday I was using this, and it got down to like 30, 25 or so. And I was by my computer, and I was like, well, I'm going to be here for a while, so I'll just go ahead and plug it in to my laptop. And it felt like, I don't know if I just got carried away with work. I wasn't monitoring the time exactly like I did that first time, but it did feel like it was charged up real quick, all the way to 100%, to the point where I was like, I pulled the thing down, I was like 100%. I was like, oh, geez, I didn't even realize I had been charging that long. So that was a nice surprise. All right. The screen is definitely smoother after a bit of writing. So that was me just following up with myself that after some time spent writing on the screen, it did feel better and smoother. Sometimes reflect light of my reading light. Discussed that already. Sometimes my presses don't register. Discussed that already. Getting files onto the device. Now, since I mentioned that the Supernote doesn't have a built-in browser that you can just open and go to any website you want to. The Boox does. So there was a strategy game that I was looking into, and I could download the PDF manual for it. And so on the Boox, I was just like, well, I'll just open a Neo browser, go to the website of the developer, and download the PDF and start reading it. That was a really nice experience on this Boox device. Unfortunately, I couldn't do the same on the Supernote because it doesn't have that browser. So what I did instead is I was like, well, what if I was out? So I'm on my home network right now, and you can drop files to the device through Wi-Fi if you're on the same network. So of course, at home, I'm on the same network, but I thought, well, what if I was out and about and I wanted to drop something to my Supernote? We weren't on the same network, or I didn't trust the network or something like that. So I tried an experiment that worked out really well. I took my iPhone, downloaded the PDF to my phone, and then set up a personal hotspot on my phone, had the Nomad join that personal hotspot, and then set up that AirDrop feature. It's not AirDrop because that's like a trademarked term for the iPhone, but the Wi-Fi dropping, the uploading to the device, turned that on, and connected to that through the browser on the Safari browser on my iPhone, and just uploaded it through the web interface of the Supernote. And that worked out really well. You could tell the web interface wasn't really optimized for a small screen like the phone, but that's okay. Since I had used it before on a regular computer, I knew where the upload button was. I knew what to do. So I was able to do that really well. And that worked out perfectly. So, not as convenient as just going to the website and downloading it, like on the Boox, but convenient enough. I don't expect to be doing that a whole lot, to be honest. So it was more of a, could this work? What if I needed this type of scenario? And it worked out pretty well. Okay. And then the last thing on my list here is sometimes when I write something, or sometimes what I write disappears until I do a refresh. So what does that mean? So I've noticed that there have been times where I'm in the middle of a sentence and the first part of my sentence just disappears. It goes away. I don't know why. But like I'll continue writing my sentence and the end of my sentence is still there on the screen. And then when I do a full screen refresh like that, the text that I wrote previously is still there. So it's not like it deletes. It doesn't delete it, but it just kind of disappears from the screen. And that's been a little annoying. I did notice on the Reddit that the Reddit subreddit for the Supernote, that there had been some complaints about that happening previously that apparently had been fixed in some software updates. And I think that there might be another update available for this either now or soon that refixes it. I think it may have come back through like a regression or something, but I think it's supposed to be fixed again. So hopefully it is, because while it doesn't happen a lot, it's very rare, but when it does happen, it's kind of confusing. So one of the things I wanted to further discuss is reading PDFs on here. So I did mention downloading the rules of a game I was looking at. But I thought, well, what if I was looking at something technical? And I do have some viewers who have asked about like kind of technical documents on the Air devices and the Supernote. So I thought I'd go ahead and go over that here. So I do have this manual for a microphone. And in that microphone manual, there are some graphs about the frequency response for the microphone and the pickup pattern for different frequencies for the microphone. So this is a technical, it's got graphs, it's got colors, got lots of lines. This is a very technical document that we can look at here on the Supernote. You can tell that the lines on the graphs are a little bit hard to pick out. Like they're pretty dim. And then of course, here, like each one of these is a different color on the original PDF. And of course, this isn't a color device, so you don't get the benefit of those colors on the PDF, which is unfortunate. Yeah, so one thing that you could do to help with the background lines is there is a way to increase the contrast. So if I go to contrast here, you can see the contrast is all the way down, which I believe is the default. But I can, put it midway, for example, and you can see that does bring out the background colors a little bit better. That those background lines a little bit better. But as you'd expect, the differentiation between the grays, the blacks and whites, are smaller. Like they're closer together. And of course, we increase that contrast even further, and it's harder to tell the differentiation between those colors. So it's a trade-off. Depending on what you're looking at, you may want that low contrast, which honestly I think probably looks best for most things. But as I was looking at this, I did think, I'll have to increase that contrast. The other thing is, this is a landscape PDF, and you can tell that it's split it up into two different pages because I'm holding it in a portrait orientation. You can see here on the page number, it does show that it's showing half of the page. And then if I hide this toolbar here, you can see that little finger there. That shows you where the first page ended off. So if I go back to the original rendering, this is the beginning of the page. And then, of course, if I go to the end of the page, this shows you where the first part of the page ended off. So it does that automatically for landscape PDFs when you're in portrait mode. And it does something similar with portrait PDFs when you're in landscape mode. And we'll take a look at something like that here in a minute. Before we move on to that, though, I do want to show you the difference between that and that same PDF here on the Boox Note Air 3. Again, this is the black and white version. It doesn't do the automatic splitting the page up because this is a larger screen already. So because of that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over into landscape mode so that we can see a better representation of it. And if I do the right thing here, auto rotate on. Okay, there we go. It's really eager to rotate. So this is what it looks like on the Note Air 3C. Sorry, the 3. The background is those lines in the background are a little easier to pick up. I don't know if that comes through on the video or not, but through my eyes, it's much easier to pick out those small lines back there than it was on the Supernote. Although now that I did a full screen refresh, they are fainter, which is interesting. Probably because the screen that was showing before this was the exact same graph in the same spot, just a different data. So maybe that background was darker because of that, because ghosting was helping out at that moment. So you can still see the colors are still hard to differentiate between. So now, since there's colors, well, what about the 3C? So let's take a look at it on the 3C. And let me make sure that, auto rotates on. So let's go ahead and rotate it. And this is what it's like on the 3C. Now, to me, there are colors. Like you can see the color swatches, like in the legend, the different colors do show up pretty well. But on the graph itself, those are pretty thin lines. And it's a little harder to differentiate between those colors because the colors are muted. Hopefully that's coming through. So if you're someone who's looking at, PDFs, technical documentation that colors matter, something like this, then the 3C, despite its flaws of, the requiring the front light and the darker screen, the battery life, then this could be the device for you. For me, I rarely look at documentation or things where color matters. So even something like this would be fine for me. Because if I really needed to know that information, then I would just open this document on my computer or my iPad. I don't typically use document or look at documentation like this on an eink device. I don't plan to. So let's go to, let me turn the screen auto rotation for this on so you can see what it looks like in landscape mode. Okay, that's on. So when I switch over to landscape mode, you can see that, again, the bigger screen is probably a benefit for something like this. So it's a little harder to see. Now, what about something where a PDF's in more of a portrait orientation? Well, I do have another file for that. Let me open that up. Okay, so this is kind of a normal, what I would call a normal PDF. So it's a documentation for some software, Logic Pro, and it looks good. It's kind of small text to me, not too small. You don't have my eyes, so I can't tell you if it's too small for you. But if I wanted to, you can also turn that to that landscape orientation, and it again renders half the page at a time. This time front to bottom. So if I go up, or maybe if I go left and right, it again shows me where I left off before the page transition, and shows me the bottom half of the page now. And to me, this is pretty good. This is good enough for me. The way it renders the image there is pretty decent. Surprisingly good, actually, in my opinion. So yeah, that's a kind of a portrait orientation. That's really all I wanted to go over today. Now, which one am I going to end up with? Like, all this started because I wasn't sure which one I was going to pick. So where does that stand? I will say that the 3C is going to go back. The battery life is too short for me, for my comfortability. If I just don't want to have to care about the battery, and I felt like I was always caring about it when I was using this. It just went down too quickly. It's always on my mind. The 3, now that leads to the 3 and the Supernote, and this is where the hard decision comes in. I find myself more often reaching for the Supernote day to day. As I'm going through the day, writing notes, reading, this is the thing I'm reaching for. I'm carrying it around with me around the house. I work from home, and this is what I'm reaching for. I have sat down with a book with this and Readwise, and that was fantastic. I loved that on this device, and that documentation for the game was really good on the Boox. It was doable on the Supernote, but it was good on the Boox. So I'm honestly, I wish they were kind of smashed together and it could be one thing. I'm probably going to end up with a Supernote, and I do know that Ratta has teased an A5X2 coming up sometime soon in the spring-ish, and I'm curious about that. I like writing more on the Supernote than on the Boox, even though both are decent experiences, good experiences, I'll say. I can totally see how someone would prefer the Boox over the Supernote. I prefer the Supernote over the Boox. That may be because I got this upgraded pen on the Supernote. My understanding is a ceramic tip, and this is a felt tip. So that could certainly play a whole big part of it, just because of the pen device that I'm using. But with what I have now and my current knowledge, the Supernote feels better, is a more fun writing experience than the Boox. Like, this is still great. Like, it's still really good. Like, even just writing on it now. I also have an iPad with an Apple Pencil, a first generation Apple Pencil, and a paper-like screen protector on it. And these are well beyond what it feels like on that. So either one of these would be fine for me. Part of me wishes I'd never gotten both, because I would have been happy with the Boox, but now I like the Supernote. But it's still, too limited. I don't know if it's too limited. So that's the problem. It is limited. Is it too limited? I still don't know yet. There is a possibility I could sideload some of those other devices on here, but that's not officially supported. There's rumors that Readwise will come to this. That's, of course, not confirmed. So I'm probably going to end up with Supernote. I'm probably going to love it. And I'll probably still have a little, you know, every once in a while, I'll look over to the Boox and be like, what's going on over in the Boox world? Because I may want to check that out again. Anyway, enough rambling from me. I like them both. They're really good. I'll probably, if I could keep both, I would. I'll probably just end up with the Supernote. It doesn't make sense really financially to keep both. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate that. Hopefully it wasn't too much rambling. If you did appreciate it, leave a like or comment. Subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments below. None of this is sponsored in any way. I bought these with my own money. They don't, you know, none of the companies even know I'm doing this, so they have no say in it. But yeah, if you do want to buy a Boox device, I do have some affiliate links on Amazon down in the description. That just basically helps out a little bit no matter what you buy from Amazon. So I'd appreciate that if you plan on buying something from it. Just follow that link and I get a little bit from that. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.